It's taken a little bit longer each time for my body to readjust to being back home. That's for sure. It was really kind of funny. Brother Dave's daughter and son, did I say that right? Yeah, daughter and son, and Jamie's wife and Randy and his son are in over there. They landed in Ireland the same day Drew and that group landed in Ireland, about 6-7 hours apart. Isn't that funny? Yeah, and then I was in London, not too far away from them. It's just a small world, right? You know, to think that we could be that close, you know, and I could have shouted out of the airplane to them and said hi, you know. So they're on their trip. Pray for their safety. We got any prayer requests tonight? Any prayer requests?
David, a friend of mine, her name is Randy Smith. She is having a pretty serious surgery on Friday. And so if everybody could remember her, I teach with her.
Okay, what's her name, Gretchen, again?
Randy Smith.
Okay. And she's having surgery?
Yes, on Friday.
Okay, let's change it up a little bit tonight. Jake, could you pray for these? Could you? And just we'll take a couple. Can you remember that one, or do you need a pen to write that down? Okay. All right, we'll add a couple more to you, then we'll give them to somebody else. Anybody else tonight? Yeah. I am sure, as, of course, you just don't know where the bottom is. It's no doubt, you know, if things keep going up and up and up, that Maggie said last time she got milk, it's like $5 a gallon. Eventually, of course, that's going to squeeze any budget. And once you get till, you know, October, November, December, when the farmers start getting this year's crops in, if they're having to pay so much money for the inputs into farming, you just have to see that come back out again, right? And who knows? I mean, I have no idea. If we had but we do have this, you know, and I just know no matter what it is, you know, that God's going to help us. But, you know, to say that it's not alarming, well, sure it is, right? And it is going to cost people, you know, especially those that are on a really fixed income, you know, it's got to hurt, you know. So certainly want to pray for that. And pray for our country. You know, it's, you know, it just seems like one divisive thing after another. It's not helping anything. Anybody else tonight? Okay. Okay, and her name's Linda? And she lost a sister. Okay. Okay. Anybody else tonight? Okay. What's his name, Dale? Austin, and that's the one who passed away? Okay. Anybody else tonight? So that'll be enough for okay, Jake. So let's see here. Brother Lloyd, can you just pray for this? We've got Cowboy Camp coming up. That's just right around the corner. Will you pray that God would just work in that? It's an opportunity for us to get out there with these kids. We got the July 4th parade that we're going to be in, and that'll be a good opportunity to get the word out. But God knows each and every one of those kids that are going to come through there, and just want it to be a time of outreach for us. We're also going to need workers, some that usually do it are going to be out of town, so there's a couple of openings for people to work. We need some folks to ride on the float when we go into the parade. There's a lot of work involved in this, so we're going to start hitting that really hard here in the next couple of weeks. But just pray that God will use that, and that those kids can block out this world that we live in, and for that 1 week, just be kids. Not have to be worried about what bathroom to use or that kind of nonsense that they're inundated with today, and that we can just tell them about Jesus. Pray that Brother Randy's going to be preaching that Sunday. Pray for that message, that God would just use that. And it's a good opportunity. I mean, I love that time of year. It takes a lot of people, and I'm very thankful for our church to be able to pull this off. You know, we got to work together. But it's a lot of fun. I like to see those kids enjoy that. And probably one of the favorite times is when the kids come up here and pray and just hear the things that are on their heart, you know, that kids are having to deal with today. So we want to pray for Cowboy Camp because it's just around the corner. Anybody else tonight? All right. Brother Jake, if you'll start, and Brother Lloyd, if you'll close. Amen. If you have your Bibles, if you'll go to 1 Samuel. And then we made it as far as to verse 16, 1 Samuel chapter 12 and verse 16. The part we left off, Samuel was just going over with Israel about how that their decision to get a king. He talked about how that, his testimony was important, and he went through with them and saying, have I ever done anything to you? Did I ever lead you astray? Have I ever taken anything from you that I shouldn't take from you? And he went through that, and we're going to pick it up here in verse 16. It says this, Now therefore, stand and see the great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest today? I will call unto the Lord, and he shall send thunder and rain, that ye may perceive and see that your wickedness is great. Turn this mic on here, sorry. That you may see that your wickedness is great, which ye have done in the sight of the Lord, and in asking you a king. So he went through here and he talked to them. I mean, you're already in chapter 12, where quite a ways through this. They've already discussed that Israel wanted a king. God told Samuel, you don't take it personally. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. Yet, it's still not over with yet. He's already taken role as a king. And Samuel's going through one more time and telling him, look, you can't blame this on me. I didn't do anything that would cause you to do that. This is something that you've done in your heart. You're the one that's rejected God. And then he says, today is the day of wheat harvest. Now, there's something about being in Africa. It rains, starts raining in November. It'll rain from November till sometime mid-April. And during that time, I mean, it rains. It rains every day. Once it starts, it doesn't stop. It's about like Florida. There'll be a couple times when it'll rain all day, but most of the time it'd be like Florida. You can expect a shower at least every day. But once it hits April, about mid-April, and it stops. So much so that you can leave anything outside. They start harvesting corn. And it's piled in huge piles everywhere outside. They'll take the whole roof off their house this time of the year. And you get used to the fact that it's not going to rain. You can leave your windows open. In fact, it used to get me every year, right? Because I would just leave all my windows open in the car. You don't have to worry about that because it's not going to rain. I mean, it doesn't even accidentally rain. I asked that because you get kind of tired of no rain. We'll make it to July, and I'm like, seriously, it's not going to rain a drop. And Malcolm says it has never, ever rained during this time period. They are so used to that they bank a lot of their work on that. They're banking that it's not going to rain, right? Because it would ruin that corn. It would cause all kinds of problems. The first rain, does catch some people off guard because it's not like it starts on an exact day. So these people here, they're getting ready for wheat harvest. It's very much the same way in Israel. It doesn't have a whole lot of rain. It's pretty predictable when the rain is going to happen, and it doesn't happen during the wheat harvest, okay? And then, so it's wheat harvest now, and Samuel says, now therefore stand and see this great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. If it rained regularly on this time, it wouldn't be a big deal what was getting ready to happen. It didn't rain on that time. They were not expecting it to rain. And so when it does catch them off guard. Now therefore stand and see this great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest today? I will call unto the Lord, and he shall send thunder and rain, that ye may perceive and see that your wickedness is great, which ye have done in the sight of the Lord, in asking you a king. So Samuel called on the Lord, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. Now, you're thinking about, when you're reading this in this Bible story, how does this apply to you? At the second I read that, I get convicted, maybe a little scared, and humbled. Because what did they do wrong? What they did wrong is they simply said, we want a king. Now, when you look at the things that America has done that would be against the Bible, which would be greater, abortion or asking for a king? Same-sex marriage or asking for a king? Or think about the things in your life that you've had to ask forgiveness over. It seems like this is not as big of a splash as some of the things we're guilty or that our country is guilty over, but look what God did. I mean, he ruined their wheat harvest. And it's not like every single person there I'm sure that there were probably some Israelites that didn't want a king. Just like there's some Americans that don't want our country to go the way it's going. We don't want that. But we can't change the mind of those people. We are going to experience, what's going to happen. We are going to be a part of that because we live here. But when you look at that, and it is a reminder for me to look at that and go, now wait a minute. That you should never play around with God. Because God is always going to be God, and God can do whatever he wants to do. Just like, remember Moses getting in trouble? He couldn't go in the promised land because he hit a rock instead of speaking to it. Right? And I look at that, and then now think about Samson. Samson slept with a prostitute, got up the next morning, and tore the gates of the city off. Now, which one do you think's worse in your mind? Which one did the greater sin? Well, you would have to say Samson, right? I mean, all Moses did was hit a rock instead of speak to it. You would say, hey, this, and then there's a verse in the Bible that says, to whom much is given, much is required. The more you know about God, the more that you are aware of what's right and wrong, the more that you've been given prior knowledge, the harder that it's always going to be, right? So for us, we've got to give an account of every message we've ever heard. Anytime we've ever sat in church over our lifetime, every time you've opened the Bible, every time that you've heard a message on the radio, any time that you have been in front of the gospel, that you've got to give an account of that. And that by doing so, Israel should have known better than what they did. Because they were delivered by God out of Egypt. They should have never forgot about that. So God is reminding them on this day that he is in control. When you look about America and how that we are founded, we're not going to be treated like, say, China would be treated or like Russia would be treated, because on their dollar it doesn't say in God we trust. On our dollar it says that. And China does not have a history of great revivals. There were not tent meetings in China that closed down bars like there were in the United States of America. There was a time when grocery stores were closed on Sunday. The countries that didn't have God are treated a little different than somebody that has had the truth. And here, this is happening, even though, he's now the king. God is just showing them one more time that this is not something he wanted for them. And they wanted them to realize that this is something that they've chosen. So that's the reason why God had it happen that day. In verse 19, and the people said unto Samuel, pray for thy servants unto the Lord thy God, that we die not. For we have added unto all our sins this evil to ask us a king. So they admitted that day that they had made a mistake collectively as a nation. And collectively as a nation, they have added to their sins. Well, I'd have to say America would absolutely be in that same spot. For sure. That's where we're at today. Now, remember, I couldn't say that every single Jew at that time was all. I'm sure that there were people saying, hey, I didn't vote for that. Like you see bumper stickers at the end of every election. It'll always say, don't blame me. I voted for whoever. I'm sure you would find Jewish people in that day that said, hey, that's what they thought. Hey, don't put me in that group. God is my king. I'm sure that there were some, but collectively as a whole, the nation went that way. Collectively as a whole, the nation had to deal with their wheat harvest getting messed up. And the question is this: has God just all of a sudden gone silent? Has he changed his mind and his opinion? Has he done away with that verse, to whom much is given, much is required? Would you say that America has been given more than other nations? Absolutely. We were handed something special, and it is eroding in front of us, right? And we can't, all that we can do is say, hey, that's them, not us, and we need to stay at the right stuff. But you also have to understand that if something were to happen to America, we cannot go to God and say, God, you forgot us. We couldn't cry out to God to say today,
why are you doing this to America? We know why he would do it to America, right? I mean, what we would have to say is let God be justified. And we also know that no matter which way that goes, God has always had a habit of protecting those that were in that society. Okay, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I was thinking about that today. Do you really believe that they threw 3 men into a fiery furnace and they walked out alive? That actually happened. Today, they mentioned there was an accident at a Caterpillar factory out west. A guy fell into the crucible today, and it killed him instantly. And I'm thinking, boy, that'd not be the way you'd want to go. But it's so hot. The coroner said he didn't feel anything. He died instantly. And I thought about that. I thought about when they threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into that firing furnace, the king was so mad he had that furnace heated up even hotter. And when they opened the doors, the people that were trying to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire, they died. Yet those men fell into that furnace, and they walked out alive. Which tells me, what did they do? In spite of what everybody else was doing, what did they say? Not me. I'm not going down that road. I'm going to stand for God. They want me to bow, I'm not bowing. They want me to conform to their rule. I'm not doing that. Think about how many people were present when they put that giant statue up and they played the music. And all the other Jews, for fear of what would happen to them, they all bowed. And here are 3 lonely Jewish men standing there. And everybody, can you imagine their friends yanking on their pant leg going, hey, get down here, hurry, they're going to see you. And they just wouldn't do it. But watch what God did for them. God blessed them and God protected them. That is our safety as we move forward in this day and age, is we just can't bow. And man, there is incredible pressure all around us. We talked about it in Bible study on Monday night, that as that day approaches, if God didn't shorten those days, even the elect themselves would fall. Right? So we know that there is going to be incredible pressure on people to conform to the system. And if you don't do that, you're the enemy. Well, as that comes, we can go to the Bible and say, now wait a minute, there is a hammer going to drop, just like it did here. All right? And where's the protection for us? Is to be in that group like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that says, I'm not going to bow to this. So let's go on with this story. So, and Samuel said unto the people, fear not, ye have done all this wicked, yet turn not aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. I love the grace of God. Even though he's saying, look, this is your fault, there's still a way out. I mean, don't you love that about God? No matter what you do, there will always be a way out with him. Until you leave this earth, there will always be a way out to him. There's not a thing in the world that after you're saved that you can't. If you ask him to forgive you, what does he say? He is faithful and just to forgive you. It doesn't say, well, how many times did you ask? Or how many times have you repeated that? It doesn't say that. It says that if you confess, that if you ask that forgiveness, he is faithful and he's just to forgive you. And although Samuel said, this is your fault, he says, but today, in spite of this, if you'll serve God, he'll still bless you. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, you can't ask for anything. That means that anytime you want a U-turn in your life, you can have one. Anytime. Anytime that you're tired of the direction that you're going, you can do an about face. And God will be right there, and he'll help you, and he'll encourage you. Now, that might not always be true of people around you. They may hold on to that, and they may remind you about that, but you can rest assured with God that he will. If you say, hey, I'm sorry, hey, forgive me, I did wrong, and you admit that to him, because that's what he's telling them, saying, he says this, fear not. Well, I mean, there's thunder and lightning on a day it's not supposed to rain. It's going to affect the wheat harvest, and what does he say? Don't be afraid. And I would ask him, well, why wouldn't I be afraid? God's obviously upset, and he said this, Yet turn not aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. And turn ye not aside for then should you go after vain things which cannot profit nor deliver you, for they are vain. Man, when you think about where the average person spends a lot of their energy, it usually is vain things. And he's saying, don't get wrapped up in that. You pay attention to what's important. It says, for the Lord will not forsake his people for his great name's sake, because it hath pleased the Lord to make you his people. Now look at verse 22. For the Lord will not forsake his people for his great name's sake. You know what he made a promise to? He made a promise to Israel that he can't go back on. Israel cannot be destroyed. He's not going to do away with the Jewish people. No matter what they do to him, he's not going to do that. Why? Because he made a promise to them. And you know what? He made a promise to me and you. I'm not Jewish. I'm probably about as Gentile as you can get. But do you know, I don't think there's any Jewish blood. I think Barnhouse is actually a German name, Barnenheiser, but when they came over, they couldn't, in Ellis Island, they wrote it down as Barnhouse, so that's why we have Barnhouse instead of Barnenheiser. I don't think I'm Jewish at all. But I know this, God made me a promise. If you confess with your mouth and believe with your heart the Lord Jesus, and that God raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. He made me a promise. He can't go back on that promise. When I asked him to save me, he did that, and there's nothing that I can do to undo that. Just like it doesn't matter how far Israel walks away from him, there's nothing that they can do for God to say, I'm done with you, because he made them a promise. And he's saying, because of that promise, that's the reason why I'm going to bless you if you do right, because I made you a promise. You know, to think about this, aren't you glad that we're not God? How many times have you told God you're not going to do something, or you are going to do something? Isn't it sad that we can't make am I the only one in this room that's ever broke a promise to God? Isn't it sad that we can't keep our word? I mean, it's pitiful sometimes you think about that. But man, I'm glad God can keep his word. And I'm glad, I know, like Drew said the other night when I told you about that story about her going to pray in that little Hindu thing she didn't realize was a Hindu temple. And Drew said, while she was praying, she said in her heart, dear God, you know I don't mean this. You know how many times I've had to go to God and say, God, what you just saw right then, that's not really me. I'm sorry you had to see that, hear that, witness that. But that's really not my heart. And he knows we're broken, right? And because of that, he is going to be kind. And he's always going to offer that. Well, Dave, with me, you got a new start. Today's a new day. Today you can make better decisions. He's a believer in you, and nobody else will be a believer in you, and everybody else thinks that you've reached that point where that's the end. He's not ever going to do that, and he didn't do that to Israel. I mean, there's lots of people that have given up on Israel. There's people today that just that almost have this animosity towards Jewish people. The reason why I can't do that is because God's not doing that, right? I mean, and I'm glad he's a promise keeper. I'm glad his word means something. When he says it, not one jot, not one tittle from this Bible, it's all going to be true. Why? Because he keeps his promise. What he says about heaven, that the streets are like gold, that's exactly what they're going to be like. When he says that there will be no night in heaven, he means that. When he says there will be no death in heaven, he means that. When he says, I'm glad I can look at the Bible and I can count on that, and that his word is true. It says this in verse 23, moreover, as for me, God forbid that I should sin against the Lord in ceasing to pray for you, but I will teach you the good and right way. Now, he's struggling with not taking this personally. He went through and he tried to clear his name and saying, I never defrauded you. And God saying, don't even go down that road, because it's not you, it's me. He said, but human nature is the need to defend yourself. And that's what he's doing. And then he stops and says this. He says, no matter, even though this has hurt me, I am still going to pray for you. I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to treat you as though that didn't happen, because that's what God would want me to do. And that, you know what? That's a sign that sometimes it's hard as human beings to let go of something. Especially if you've been felt like you've been done wrong. We want to hold on and prove a point and prove a point and prove a point. He doesn't have to prove a point. God already told him you don't have to prove a point. He said, listen, quit worrying about this for you. They're not mad at you. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. And he had a hard time letting go of that. Which is why he read this whole dialogue of his reputation, and he's rehashing all of that. That was for him. Right? God didn't, it's not something that God needed him to do. He just wanted to get that out there. Now he's stopping and he's saying this. He's saying, as much as though, I didn't like all this, it says, moreover, as for me, God forbid. He knows he can't do that. Moreover, as for me, God forbid that I should sin against the Lord in ceasing to pray for you. Well, you know what? Have you ever known somebody that you should pray for, but you don't want to pray for? That's where he's at. Don't ever let this world do that to you. Right? I mean, God is a God of forgiveness. And when we can't forgive and we can't just let it go, and by the way, when you do that, I mean, you got to let it go. If you say you forgive somebody, you just got to let it go. If you harbor any feelings inside, then you didn't forgive them. Forgiveness, there's actually freedom in doing that. And he has to just let this go. And he has to serve them, and he has to be with them, and he can't revisit that. It's a done deal, and he's got to move on. Only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider how great things he hath done for you. But if ye shall do wickedly, ye shall be consumed, both ye and your king. He's saying, look, God doesn't have to, but he's going to bless your king. He doesn't have to, but he's going to. But as long as you do what's right, but if you don't, not only are you going to suffer, but your king's going to suffer. Chapter 13. Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose him 3,000 men of Israel, wherefore 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash in Mount Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Geba of Benjamin, and the rest of the people he sent every man to his tent. And Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. And Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. And all Israel heard say that Saul had smitten the garrison. Now what's wrong with that one statement right there? Who destroyed the garrison? Jonathan. Who took credit for it? And so he's automatically, and later on, who else is he going to have issues with? David, right? I mean, he's going to have issues with David with the same thing. And it's odd. Why would the Bible say Jonathan did it, and then just right underneath that, Saul goes out and he says he did it? Because what's one of the things that God warned him about a king? King was going to be about himself. Right? I mean, if it got out that Jonathan killed him, then they might be more loyal to Jonathan. God doesn't have an ego problem. He doesn't have to. He is God, right? He would never act in that way because he doesn't have to act in that way. But immediately here, what's important is who gets the credit. That's what's important. And remember, it's I forget who's that guy that Paul said that loved the preeminence. I forgot the guy's name. But there was a guy that Paul worked with, and he said that he loved the preeminence, meaning he loved to be noticed. He loved to be recognized. He craved to have his name mentioned. And he's saying that was a downfall, right? Because the one that matters already knows. And that's the Lord. We don't need recognition from it down here. Right? And in heaven, if it doesn't get burned up, you'll get recognition for it in heaven. But Saul in his pride, which is starting to show right here in the beginning, that's what's going to cause him problems later on. Because he cannot, it's going to cause him to stumble when listening to God. It's going to cause him from taking instruction like he needs to, and it's showing up immediately right here. So when you read something like that, you got to stop and say, okay, why did he make sure we knew about this? Verse 5, and the Philistines gathered themselves together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came and pitched in Michmash eastward towards Bethaven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were distressed, then the people did hide themselves in caves and in thickets and in rocks and in high places and in pits. They haven't been in battle yet, okay? But they see the enemy, and the enemy is bigger than they are, right? He sees them, and he's saying, hey, look at all those. They haven't gone to war yet. I mean, here's this new king. They haven't gone in battle. They just see the enemy, and they quit before it even gets going. How many times do we do that in our own Christian life? We just see and we automatically don't think God's strong enough. We don't think that God can, and so we instead of trusting God and going forward, they're going backwards. How do they know they can't beat him? They haven't even gone to battle yet. God said he was going to be with them. God said, hey, I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to be with your king. I'm going to bless you as long as you follow me. They had God on their side, but then they look out there and say, wait, that problem's too big. When you look at why marriages fail, why families get in trouble, if you begin to unravel and look back and say, why did this happen? You're going to get to a root problem that was something that could have been dealt with had it been dealt with at the first. But when you begin to think that God can't, and you begin to internalize those problems yourself, and you begin to think that that the enemy's too big. The enemy's never too big for God. Never too big for God. When we begin to doubt that, that's when we get in trouble. When we begin, and you know what, all it takes is both people to quit on the same day, and that's toast, right? But if you look at God, they didn't look at God. They looked at that army, they looked at themselves and said, we can't do that. Well, guys, people would be quitting all over the place if you did that. If you looked at this world, you know what you'd do? You'd go find some place in Alaska and you'd hide out till the rapture blew. Right? Why? Because, whoa, what am I going to do out there? This place is getting crazy. But if God's in control, I don't need to worry about that. So they're worrying about something that hasn't even been proven yet. They haven't gone to battle with him. They haven't trusted God with that. Now, again, you can't always change somebody else, but I am a firm believer in this Bible that God can still move mountains. He can do things that you would never think he can do. He's capable of working in hearts. Can we take the Bible and prove that God has changed the heart of a king? Yes. I mean, he can work behind the scenes. He can change things that only he can do. But when we give up before we've ever given him a chance to work, when we've thrown up our hands and said, hey, we're all doomed, then we're stuck being defeated. And they haven't even gone to battle yet, and they're worried about, they're already hiding. Verse 7, and some of the Hebrews went over to Jordan in the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was yet in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, bring hither a burnt offering to me and a peace offering. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he made an end of the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, what hast thou done? And Saul said, because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, that the Philistines gathered themselves together at Michmash. Therefore said I, the Philistines will come down now upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplications to the Lord. I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. So this is the first time where Saul willingly does something he knows God doesn't want him to do because he's not willing to wait. God told him he's not supposed to make this sacrifice. Only a priest can make this sacrifice. He's not supposed to do that. And what he should have told those people is this. You can either make a problem better or you can make the problem worse. All that he had to do is get up and be a leader and say, no, we are going to wait on God. We can trust him. We can count on him. We're not going to force this issue. We're not going to do something that we know we shouldn't do. We're just going to wait on God because he said that he's going to be with us. I can't do this sacrifice, and I'm not going to do this sacrifice. Instead, what did he do? He gave in to his pride, and he said, okay, I'll do this sacrifice. Right? So he's already, again, having a problem with just being obedient to what God said. Whenever we handle that, whenever we begin to handle those problems that way, so you take it today. Countless times when you talk to people who are going through family problems, so many times the person will come and say, I'm not happy, or, this isn't working out, or I'm miserable, and, I want to be with somebody that makes me happy. Go through all these things. And I can go to that person and say, listen, that's not what, I don't believe at any time God wants any family to fall apart. That wasn't his plan. He's never changed that. He said, let what he put asunder, let no man take apart. That's never changed. I can't get on that bandwagon and say that's okay. Now, I understand that you can't control that other party, but you can hold that line. You not be the one that does that. Don't you be the one that says, well, I just need to be. No, you stay where you need to be. Let God have that chance to work. And if the other person just wants nothing to do right, let them deal with that. Let them make that decision. Don't you make that decision. And that's what I would tell them, because that's what the Bible would say. That the advice he should have gave those people is, no, we're not going to do this sacrifice. No, we're going to wait, and we're going to trust God. Because when I got married, I made a promise. Now, if you don't want to keep the promise, that's on you. But me, I'm going to hold on to that as long as I possibly can and do everything in my power to do so. Even includes, it means forgiving, pushing on, getting over her, whatever you got to do. Why? Because that's what God would want to do. That's what he said to do. And either he's God or he's not God. And yes, that's hard, but if both people would do that, you could get through any problem. If both people would do that. When we began, the last thing I told him, I said, look, I can't tell you, well, you can get a divorce just because you're not happy. I can't tell you that you can do that. I'm going to tell you, no, get in there and fight for that. Hold on. Don't give up on God. God's not going to give up. Give him a chance to work in you. Give him a chance to work in until the last man falls and there's no other straw, and they go and they file and they say they're done. And you can look at lots of other ways. It's really, really easy to want to get in the flesh and handle it ourselves instead of just saying, look, I'm going to let God do that. I do it, it's going to get messy. I'm going to let God do that. I'm going to let him have a chance. Because you know what's a great example of the grace of God? When something broken is put back together. That's a picture of what Jesus did for me. Whether it's a bad marriage or whether it's somebody that's on drugs or whatever you want to say, whenever God takes something that was broken and he looks at those pieces and he says, I can fix this. I can take this piece here. If you're willing, I can take this piece here. I can put it back together. And I think that's pretty cool that he can do that. Do you know there's a lot of broken people out there that God's put back together? There's even broken marriages that God's put back together. And it's a trophy of his grace and what he can do. And Israel should have just trusted God. And they should have said, no, we don't need to be afraid of what's out there, because we know that God can take care of us. Let's just go just a little bit further. It says in verse 13, and Samuel said to Saul, thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. So his actions had consequences. Now, what do you think about this? We know we live in an age of grace. What does Romans chapter 6 say? Should we continue in sin that grace may abound? What comes next after that? God forbid. And why is he telling that? Because you're moving away from the Old Testament. We're no longer stoning people for the Sabbath and for committing adultery. And now the atmosphere is, okay, I can go to God and I can get forgiveness over anything, and he's going to forgive me. Absolutely. But it is no reason to continue down that road. Why? Because no matter what you do, just like taking that fruit off that tree had consequences, sin always has consequences. And how many times do you think an average person sins during the day? Once a day? Once every 50 minutes? I don't know. All I know is that nowhere in the Bible can I ever find that sin has ever lost its consequences. So here's the question. How much are we paying? Probably won't know that until you get to heaven. And yes, every one of them I can ask forgiveness for, and he'll do that. Just wonder what it cost us. Right? And you can see the angel look at God in heaven and saying, was that really worth that? You say something unkind with your mouth, you can't get it back again. You can go to somebody and say, hey, I'm sorry for saying that. The problem is, in James it says that it's an unruly evil. It's like a poison. That'll always stick with that person, and then later on, because I hurt them with my tongue, they might be more vulnerable for somebody else to hurt them with their tongue, and that consequence could go on a long ways. One little action in public, me being human just for 5 minutes with somebody behind a cash register, and somebody else see that and find out that, well, I'm a pastor and I was rude, and then they say, well, if that's what Christianity is, and then on Judgment Day they say, well, why didn't you hear? And they go, well, because that, we won't know. But when I look at this, I'm reminded, I sit there and I go, I'm not comfortable with that. Because it's reminding me that sin, what he did then, caused an effect somewhere else. And God said, your kingdom's not going to be forever because of today. Because I can't trust you. And that's sad to think that we can actually, in a way, alter that. This is what God wants, but I can alter that by simply just being disobedient. That even though we might not think things as being like, how many of you, of course, told God you'd do something, you didn't do it? What about Aquila and Priscilla? They're dead. Why did they die? Because they told God they did something and they didn't do it. I'm going, ooh, that's a little scary. It should always bother us. It should always bother us inside anytime we sin to think about this. What did that cost? What was that old movie? Every time an angel got their wings, there's a bell. Ding. It's a Wonderful Life. I wonder if it was in reverse. That every time you sin, there would be a bell that goes off. Ding. And you know you can ask forgiveness, and you know he'll forgive you. But that ding represents, but it cost you something. Boy, if you could hear that ding, you know what you do? Whoo, that's 5 dings in one day. I'm going to get overdrawn on that bank account. Right? Well, because if it cost him something here, if it cost Aquila and Priscilla something, what makes us think it doesn't cost us anything? Right? Which then would cause you and I to look at that and go, wait a minute. Maybe I need to pay attention to this a little bit more. Yes? You know, should I continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. And it's a sobering thing when you read that and you think, eesh. You know, I mean, you know, and when you get to heaven you realize, well, this is what could have been, but God had to change that because I wasn't obedient to him. Okay, just one more and we'll be done. And see, it says, and Samuel said to Saul, thou hast done foolishly, thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee, for now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be a captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. Now, we'll end there. Who's he talking about when he says he's going to seek after a man after his own heart? Dave. All right? Now, immediately we have to go there for just a second. We know David did some pretty dumb things. Numbered the people, 70,000 people die, the whole Bathsheba thing. Now, did sin cost him something? Yes. Right? But why, when Saul did not kill Agag, God took that kingdom from him and wouldn't even listen to him. Why did God continue to listen to David even after he committed adultery and had that guy killed? Which do you think is worse? Not killing Agag or having an affair and then murdering the guy? So how did David survive that? Right here. That's how he survived it. God knew his heart. You know, God can tell when you're sorry because of the consequences, or you're sorry because you disappointed God. And in Psalms 51, what did David say in that prayer? He said, against thee and thee only have I sinned. No, David also did things that were wrong. David also made bad decisions. But when David did that in his heart, instead of blaming it, what did Saul do here? He blamed. He said, well, you were late. And then what did he do when Agag? He blamed. Right? He didn't take ownership of it. He blamed. He didn't say, hey, I'm guilty. He blamed. He didn't say, hey, I'm going to do this again. He just kept shifting the blame. With your relationship with God, don't shift the blame. You do far better just being 100% honest and saying, hey, I'm guilty, I'm sorry, it's nobody's fault but mine. And then God said of David, he is a man after my own heart. Because his heart truly was sorry, and God can tell that. And God will be gracious because he can also tell if you're just throwing the blame down the road and you're not taking responsibility for it. It's a whole lot better, because what we like to do in a problem is saying, God, I shouldn't have said that, but they did this to me. God, I shouldn't have done that, but this happened. God, I shouldn't have felt this way, but you don't know how they hurt me. Or God, I shouldn't have done, and what you do, yes, you know this is wrong, but immediately you're trying to deflect it. You're trying to push it on. Maybe it's your kids. Maybe it's your husband. Maybe it's somebody else. The guy at work. No, I shouldn't have been ugly with my mouth, but my boss is a jerk. You know, as soon as you say that, then you're deflecting that. It does much better to say, hey, against thee and thee only have I done this, and I'm sorry. And you know what you'll get out of God if you do that? A lot of grace. A lot of grace. Because you know what? He knows you're broken. He knows you're going to mess up. And David knew that God loved him anyway. And he truly felt sorry because he let God down. And God can tell that. And man, I tell you, that means the world to him. Right? And that's why he's gracious to some, and others it seems like he's just hammering them. And we can find that grace too in our lives if we take that approach when we go to the throne. Brother Arnold, can you close us in prayer?